Thanks, Zach. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today to talk about the impacts of the government shutdown. We've got a few folks here who are going to share what this means for the community and the people that they serve. But I want to start off by setting the stage. A government shutdown isn't just a political showdown. It has real consequences for hardworking Kansans and for our economy. And we are seeing that play out right now. There are more than 25,000 federal workers in Kansas that are impacted. Many don't know when their next paycheck will come. Small businesses that rely on federal contracts are feeling the squeeze. Farmers face uncertainty over critical agricultural programs. And even folks relying on Social Security and Medicare are struggling to access basic services. Kansans are frustrated, and rightfully so. They want solutions and not more partisanship. A shutdown erodes trust. A shutdown stalls progress. A shutdown delays action on things that matter the most, like lowering costs, keeping families safe, and improving our roads and bridges. My top priority right now is getting the government back open as quickly as possible. But Congress can chew gum and walk at the same time. So I am also working to make sure that Kansans don't get hit with skyrocketing healthcare costs. The ACA health insurance tax credits are set to expire this year. And if Congress doesn't act, premiums could rise for folks by as much as 70%. That's 70%. That is unacceptable. And folks that I have been talking to are absolutely terrified. The only way forward on reopening the government and heading off a healthcare price hike is through bipartisan cooperation. Bipartisan cooperation is the only way through this. It is not optional, it's math. You need 60 votes in the Senate. Both parties must come to the table. Unfortunately, right now, Republican leadership and President Trump have made it clear that they are not interested in negotiating. In fact, they openly said it again this week. And in a time of crisis like this, that is failed leadership. Kansans expect us to do our jobs, reopen the government, and put their needs before political games. That is my focus, and that's what I'm going to keep fighting for. So I'm going to turn it over to Haley Kotler, who's the campaign director for Kansas Appleseed, and I will be back afterward for a quick Q&A. Haley?
Thank you, Congresswoman. Good afternoon, everyone. As we continue to face uncertainty around the federal government shutdown, I want to take a few minutes to talk about what this means for families who rely on programs like SNAP and WIC, and why it's so important that Congress acts swiftly to resolve this. Programs like SNAP and WIC are not just numbers in a budget, they're lifelines for Kansas families. They help parents put food on the table, make sure babies have formula, and ensure that our seniors and people with disabilities don't have to choose between food and medicine. In Kansas alone, almost 200,000 people utilize SNAP. In the short term, funding is in place to keep benefits going, but the longer this shutdown lasts, the more uncertainty grows for Kansans. States may face delays in reimbursements, local WIC offices could have to cut back on services, and families already living on the edge will have to face impossible choices. No parent should be glued to the news to know if they will still have critical assistance. No senior should have to worry about politics that could take food off their plates. And no Kansas community should have to shoulder unnecessary burdens because families are left in limbo. Organizations like Kansas Appleseed work to highlight the real impact of these programs on Kansas families and to advocate for policies that protect them. Our goal is simple: ensure that families and communities have the support they need to thrive, and that policymakers understand the consequences when that support is threatened. SNAP and WIC are proven, effective, and efficient. They strengthen communities, reduce hunger, and even support local economies. For SNAP alone, for every $1 spent in Kansas, it generates $1.54 in economic activity. This helps grocery stores, farmers markets, and Kansas businesses thrive. Beyond this, these programs provide stability and peace of mind to families. While we don't want families to panic, we do need policymakers to act with urgency and compassion. Ending the shutdown is the fastest way to protect those who rely on these critical supports. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Sarah White, and I am a board member of Missouri and Associated Rivers Coalition. MOARC was established in 1952 to promote beneficial use of water resources in Kansas and Missouri. For 73 years, MOARC has advocated for flood control and water resource conservation in the Kansas and Missouri River basins, including multiple urban streams in the KC metro area. MOARC works closely with the Corps of Engineers, FEMA, and EPA to bring flood protection, water use, and water quality projects to Kansas. MOARC's concern with the federal government shutdown is the impact on flood fighting, preparedness, and response times, permit reviews, and critical infrastructure inspections. Two of the worst floods in the KC metro history occurred during the fall, so we are not out of the flood risk at this time. Our flood response and preparedness relies on all levels of government, local, state, and federal. With the shutdown, our federal partners may not be available, which exposes our community for flood risk and also slows the response times for cleanup. There is also an impact on permit reviews, such as the Corps' 404 and 408 permits, that we could potentially see delays in projects that are waiting for these permits. There could also be an impact during the shutdown on annual infrastructure inspections, which could include dams and levees, as well as environmental compliance. MOARC would like to express appreciation for the Corps of Engineers and other federal agencies as they strive to maintain momentum and keep vital projects and programs moving forward during this time. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Keely Schneider, and I'm the Executive Director for Workforce Partnership. Workforce Partnership is one of 3 local workforce development boards in the state of Kansas, and we service largely the Kansas side of the Kansas City metropolitan area. For those of you unfamiliar with the Workforce Board, we serve both job seekers and employers. For our job seekers, we provide a lot of basic services around job search, job information like labor market information, as well as information around training programs, resume writing, interviews, all of those things in order to get a job. We also support a lot of low-income individuals with specific barriers to employment, as well as people who've been laid off from work in more intensive programming. And that includes the ability for us to help pay for some of the training to upskill and reskill so that those individuals are ready to be part of the workforce that is demanded right now by our employers. The difficulty that we're having right now with the federal shutdown is that there are a number of federal workforce grants and training programs, including Workforce Board base level funding that's so important to us, that really help Kansans gain these new skills as well as connect them to our local employers. I'll give you an example. So our base level funding under WIOA is funding that has a 1 to 18 $1 to $18 ROI in our community. Without these funds, we truly are slowing down economic development, job development, and the ability of our economy to move forward. Right now, those federal funds have been authorized and appropriated, but we must wait for the U.S. Department of Labor to give us the go-ahead to spend those funds. We are waiting right now, and we've been waiting for 2 weeks for those fiscal year 2026 funding. Should have been available to us October 1st. So the longer we delay with the shutdown, the longer we are delayed in receiving that authority to spend our funds. And for those of you who are not familiar, we don't get reimbursed. We work on a reimbursement basis. So we have to spend first and get reimbursed later. So like many federal programs, that's how they work. So we're sitting in a situation where we've already spent and we're waiting on that. It's a cash flow issue. Without the funding, our workforce centers do face delays in our job placement services, delays in the development and placement of individuals in registered apprenticeship programs, as well as the delays in serving people who are laid off from work, which is just critical to get them back into the community. In addition to all of the workforce funding that is getting held up at this time, we also have a number of small businesses that depend on SBA loans or federal contracts, and those are also on hold. That puts that local growth and job creation at risk. And we know the overwhelming majority of places that our workforce comes from, our jobs are created, they're from small businesses. Small businesses need those loans and those federal contracts to flow because, again, it's a cash flow issue. Every day that this shutdown drags on, we have more and more Kansas workers and small businesses who are losing opportunities to move forward with their lives and to move forward with their business plans. I know Representative Davis has been working so hard to find a bipartisan solution and to get the government back on track. We need this so businesses and workers can thrive, and we need a federal government that supports and facilitates the growth in our economy and not stall that growth. So thank you. Really appreciate the opportunity to share.
Hi, my name's Tim DeWeese, and I'm the director of Johnson County Mental Health Center. The federal shutdown threatens access to critical mental health services across Johnson County and the region, especially for those individuals and families who depend upon federal programs for care and stability. Many local providers, including ourselves, rely on federal grants to deliver essential mental health services. When those funds are delayed or uncertain, we may be forced to scale back services, pause programs, or even delay outreach, leaving vulnerable individuals within our community without the support they need. And it's just not about funding. When people lose income, when their housing is at risk, or they lose food assistance due to the shutdown, the likelihood of them experiencing a mental health crisis increases. At the same time, the ability to access care becomes even more limited. This creates a dangerous cycle of instability and unmet need. At Johnson County Mental Health Center, we know that mental health care is not optional. Delays in treatment can have devastating consequences for individuals, families, and our entire communities. We are grateful to elected officials who work across the aisle to reopen the government and ensure Kansas can access the care that they need and deserve. We need stability in Washington, D.C., and our community needs it as well, to ensure no one is left without mental health care because of politics. Mental well-being depends on consistent access to basic needs and support. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you all today.
Well, thank you again to Haley, Sarah, Keely, and Tim for sharing your stories, for sharing the facts that you are seeing on the ground. I have to say that I've been thinking a lot about our active duty service members right now and what this shutdown means for them. In less than a week, thousands of folks who are serving our country won't get a paycheck if Congress doesn't act. My mom served in the Army for 20 years, living paycheck to raise me and my brothers on her own. And if she missed even one paycheck, I can't even tell you how much we would have struggled to keep the lights on or put food on the table. And no family that serves this country should go through that. And neither should the federal workers or small business owners that we heard about, the farmers in Kansas who are caught in all these folks who are caught in the middle of this shutdown. Kansas is a place with people with so much resilience and such strong community ties. And in tough times, we have always stood together, helping one another through those tough times. And this is a moment that is no different. For folks impacted by the shutdown, I want to make sure that everyone knows that my team and I are here to help, that we have launched a page on my website. It's at davids.house.gov/shutdown with resources and updates for anyone who needs support. This is Clearly, this is an evolving situation. And while I'm working to end this as soon as possible, we're going to keep that page updated. We're going to continue to assist in however and however ways we can. And as always, you can also call my office at 913-621-0832 for assistance. And at the end of the day, the only way forward out of this is bipartisan compromise. I'm going to keep doing everything I can to bring people to the table and get the government back open. And I'll just say this one more time. Thank you again to everyone for being here. Thank you to our panelists. And we're going to go ahead and open it up for questions now.
All right, thank you all so much. If you have a question, feel free to raise your hand or put in the chat. All right, we got one. And feel free to unmute yourself.
Okay. Yeah, Sherman Smith at Kansas Reflector. What we're seeing from Republicans in Kansas, like Senate President Ty Masterson, is this talking point about how the shutdown is because Democrats are trying to get health care for illegal immigrants. And I just wonder how you defeat that narrative.
Well, first of all, that's just not true. That's a lie. I would say that the first thing that we should all be concerned about is making sure that we get the government back open. And I've heard these kind of political talking points being spread around. And I can tell you at the end of the day that Kansans are feeling the impact of the failed leadership of the administration. We're seeing rising prices, we're seeing lost jobs, we're seeing cuts to healthcare, and this shutdown is only making all of that worse. I have heard too many times the talking points that you just shared, when the reality is that the Republicans have control of the House, the Senate, and the White House out here in Washington. And so far, we haven't seen a serious effort from them to work across the aisle on funding the government. In fact, Speaker Johnson literally has closed down the US House floor. And when I think about the importance of this and how egregious it is to make up those kind of talking points, when what we're really talking about is the 160,000 Kansans who right now are saving $700 a year on their premiums, and knowing that if Congress doesn't act, we're going to see a 70% increase in premiums for folks. And again, that's 70% premium increase. When folks are already struggling to put food on the table, get their prescriptions, get their kids to school, put gas in the car, and it's it is so frustrating, not just to me, but to everyday Kansans, when we see political gamesmanship instead of folks actually coming to the table to negotiate. I'm here ready to work with anyone. I don't care what party people are. I care, are we doing stuff that's good for the country and good for Kansas? We need real bipartisan compromise right now to get this government open and to ward off this healthcare crisis.
All right, thank you. We have Jack, feel free to unmute yourself.
Thank you. I have seen some Republicans say they're open to the enhanced ACA subsidies, but from leadership, it's been pass the CR and we'll negotiate later. Do you have any faith that if you passed the CR, that they'd come to the table on these subsidies further down the line?
That's a really good question. And, you know, the thing I can say about this is we're seeing recognition from both sides of the aisle about this healthcare uh, healthcare crisis that's going on, and the fact that so many people are on the verge of having their premiums increase by 70%. And when you see folks like myself and folks like Marjorie Taylor Greene from Georgia on the same page about the absolute dire need to address the ACA tax credits and access to health care, then that that tells me and anyone who is working on behalf of their constituents that it's time for leadership, for specifically Republican leadership, to start taking this stuff seriously. And I think that right now we are in a situation where this government shutdown is having catastrophic impacts on folks, and so is the impending uh, premium increases alongside the Medicaid cuts that just happened that are going to be catastrophic for our state. It's past time to, quit this partisan bickering and actually come to the table and negotiate.
You. Next we have Kaylin, feel free to mute yourself.
Hi. Can you hear me? Am I?
I can hear you.
Yes.
Hi, Kaylin Moore, for High Plains Public Radio. Representative Davids, earlier this week you worked on some legislation for in the future FAA being able to stay open during these shutdowns when these happen. I wanted to ask, covering a largely rural area, have you heard of or are worried about any struggles that airports and air travel are having in our largely rural state, especially kind of in our more isolated areas?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. One of the things that I One of the things that I can tell you is so important about a federal government shutdown and why it's catastrophic is because the federal government really does have an impact on our everyday lives, and often it's in ways that most folks don't see and actually shouldn't have to spend time worrying about. When we talk about the impact of this on rural parts, not just of Kansas, but rural parts of our country, and you specifically brought up FAA, which I appreciate because if you're in a rural part of this country, if you're out in rural Kansas and something happens, you need to have access to something called essential air service. And if the government shutdown doesn't end soon, things like essential air service to help make sure we can get people from rural areas to a hospital or to the care they need will be impacted. And one of the reasons that the FAA standalone bill is so important is because, in addition to that, we also have air traffic controllers. Most of our air traffic controllers in this country are federal civil servants. They are employees of the FAA, and in addition to the safety of every single person who gets on a plane, whether that's a commercial or, we've got a bunch of crop dusters and all that kind of stuff. They need to know that air traffic controllers are 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 able to fully be present, and they're doing it. They're there. But we should make sure that they don't have to take on any additional stress. The safety aspect is so important. And I know you mentioned the FAA and asked specifically about that, but the other thing I want to touch on, and I know I mentioned this in my comments, but I'm an Army brat, and so many people in my family, I'm Ho-Chunk, which is a tribe in Wisconsin, but so many people in my tribe have served this country. And I am also on a piece of legislation to make sure that our service members get paid and that they don't see any kind of lapse in the event of a government shutdown. Again, a government shutdown is completely avoidable and should not be caught up in partisan bickering and gamesmanship. But if a government shutdown happens, our service members should not be impacted by that. These folks are serving us all around the world, in our own backyards, and should be taken care of.
Thank you. Frank,
Actually, I'm so sorry. I just want to make sure, especially because I know, um, well, MOARC addresses lots of different areas, and I don't, if there's anything you wanted to say about um, that safety aspect or anything, I want to make sure that you get the chance to do that. It's okay if you don't. I
Oh,
just,
well, thank you, Rep. Davids. Yeah, so that's something, you know, MOARC's members are concerned with is um, during a government shutdown, um, the Corps of Engineers, FEMA, they're the employees that are on are funded by annual programs. are currently, risking being furloughed. And that includes our critical infrastructure inspections, as well as some of the flood fighting efforts, both forecasting that as well as response time during the event. We do, most of them do have local and state responsibilities as well. So it is a three-pronged partnership. But, when you're missing part of that, that does, increase our risk. And, one of the things is a lot of people don't think of October as a flood risk time, but, two of the most deadly floods in the Kansas City metro area happened in the fall. So we're definitely not out of the woods, and we do want to make sure that our federal partners are also being supported. And then during a government shutdown, they're not able to fully do their jobs.
Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you,
Thank you.
Sarah. I'm not seeing any more questions. Frank, I saw you had your hand up, but you put it down. So if you do want to talk, now's the time. But um, thank you so much to Rep. Davids, to our panelists for being here. And like I said earlier, we will be sending out a press release afterwards with a link to this with a full recording. So feel free to take a look there. But always reach out to me if you have any questions. But seeing no questions, we will end it here. So thank you all. Have a good day.
Thank you.